Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at communism taking hold in China. And really what we're doing is giving a basic overview of communists in China versus what were called nationalists in China. We did cover this a while back when Mao Zedong first came into power, and we looked at the Long March and some of the events that took place back then. Now it's going to be what was happening during World War II in China. So we'll first take a look at Mao Zedong. He led the Chinese communists, and he was fighting against the Japanese invaders during the time period of World War II. Communism under Mao had a stronghold in northwestern China, and this is near Russia. They shared a very long span of border there. He fought the Japanese, though, in northeast China, and one of the big things about Mao is he had the loyalty of the peasants. His adversary, Jieshi, or also known as Chang Kai Shek, was the leader of the Chinese Nationalists in World War II. They generally controlled southwestern China, where they were protected from Japanese by vast mountain ranges. The Nationalists fought very few battles against Japan, actually, and the United States, to help them fight battles, had sent $1.5 billion in aid that really was never used for its intended purpose. After World War II, the Nationalists and the Communists in China resumed the civil war that we have learned about in the past. There's a nice comparative chart, and that is found in your textbook on page 973. It just shows you the difference between Mao and Chiang Kai-Shek, and these are some of the areas that they were compared in 1945. This is Mao over here on the right. This is Jiang Jieshi or Chiang Kai-Shek on the left. It talks about the areas that they ruled. Nationalists were receiving foreign support from the United States. The communists obviously were receiving foreign support from the Soviets. The domestic policy was of the nationalists to defeat the communists, and the communists wanted national liberation. Public support was actually weak for the nationalists due to inflation in the economy and other problems with economic development. And for the communists was pretty strong because the peasants made up the majority of the population, and they were promised land reforms by Mao and the Communist Party. Military organization was rather ineffective for the nationalists. They had corrupt leadership and very poor morale. Once again, the United States sent $1.5 billion, in which they really did not use to fight the Japanese. And for the communists, they were rather experienced. They were motivated for their ideas of national liberation and to gain land reforms. And they generally utilize guerrilla tactics. So those are some of the big comparative looks here between these two groups at this time period in history. Okay, now we'll take a look at when the Civil War resumes. Economic problems caused nationalist soldiers to desert, and a lot of them joined into the communist side. Mao's troops took control of China's major cities. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was created. That was a communist group. The nationalists retreated to the island of Taiwan. In 1950, the Soviets and China signed a treaty of friendship. The United States saw this as one step closer to the expansion of communism. And so these two different Chinas, the nationalists, which are in Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China, which was now the Communist Party, had an impact on the Cold War, and certain superpowers would react with their own entities there. So for point one here, the United States supported the nationalist state in Taiwan, which was called the Republic of China. Not to be confused, there's the Republic of China, which is on the nationalist side, and then there's the People's Republic of China, which is the communist ideology there. The Soviets and China agreed to help each other in the event of any attack. The United States actually tried to stop Soviet expansion and the spread of communism throughout Asia. China expanded actually under the communists. They took control of Tibet and also southern Mongolia. The Tibetans actually follow the leadership of the Dalai Lama, and because of this invasion by China, the Dalai Lama fled to India. India began to welcome Tibetan refugees that were fleeing the Chinese, and China and India then clashed over border issues until the fighting stopped, but tensions remained rather high between the two groups. Then we'll take a look at how the communists transformed China under Mao. The communists claimed a new mandate of heaven. If you remember all the way back into chapter 12 in world history, or AP topic 1.1 and 1.2, when we're talking about Song China, the mandate of heaven is this ideology that the leadership or the ruler of China is given his powers from the heavens or the gods above. And if things are going well, then they can continue to rule. If things do not go well under their rule, then they are to be replaced. And this is called also the dynastic cycle. So this is a new version of that. The Chinese communists would organize a national government and Communist Party under Mao's control. Let's take a look at how Mao practiced socialism. Mao took property away from landowners, and his goal was to divide it among the peasant class. Government actually seized private companies and planned production increases, and his plan was called the Great Leap Forward. The Great Leap Forward was dependent on what are called communes. Communes are large collective farms, often attempting to support over 25,000 people. The program is actually ended after inefficiency led to crop failures and famine. 20 million people died due to the failure of the Great Leap Forward, and the average commune was about 15,000 acres. Peasants would have to be working together, living in communal dormitories, eating in communal dining rooms, etc., etc. It was a really big failure, and as you can see, 20 million people died as a result of those practices. New policies then came into play, and Mao's response. China and the Soviet Union began to clash over who was going to take control of leading the communist movement in this region of the world. Strict socialist ideals are moderated, and Mao reduced his role in government. There was also a group that came into play in China called the Red Guards. These are militia units that were formed to enforce strict communism in China. Most people who joined the Red Guards were like college-age students that had become radicalized at the college level, which when you're in college, when you hear about a lot of the new ideas and you're learning about the different parts and ways of governing, that's something that generally happens with people. They go through kind of a change and experimental stage in their thought process. The Cultural Revolution is a movement to build a society of peasants and workers. The Red Guards were going around closing schools, and they actually began to execute or imprison many intellectuals. In 1968, the Chinese army actually imprisoned, executed, or exiled, kicked out of the country most of the Red Guards or former Red Guards. So that's a brief idea, a brief ideology, a brief look at, of course, communism in China and how it affected the Cold War. Two big figures there, Mao Zedong and the Communist Party, and the Nationalist Party led by Jieshi, or aka Chang Kai Shek. You can see that in this lesson, the Communist Party took control of China.